loud opinions, so turn it up and get ready to
All right,
rant.
welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Read It Rant podcast, where we talk books, authors, storytelling, and everything happening in the world of reading. And as always, we don't sugarcoat anything. Today, we're going to step through the doorway into a world where humanity's myths aren't myths at all. Imagine being a college student in New York one moment and then suddenly finding yourself ripped away from everything you know and thrown into a medieval world filled with dragons, monsters, political intrigue, dangerous alliances, ancient legends, and a prophecy claiming that somehow you're supposed to save everyone. That is the situation facing Finley McGuire in Tim Clark's Rise of the DragonWitch, which is the first book in the Chronicles of Tyrna. Finley finds herself in Tyrna, a hidden world populated by creatures humanity has regulated to mythology. She quickly discovered there's a prophecy surrounding her and a mad king whose ambitions threaten far more than one kingdom. There's just one little problem. Finley doesn't exactly consider herself hero material, and that's where things get kind of interesting. You know, Tim really brings in a fascinating background to the conversation as well. Before writing the Chronicles of Tyrna, Tim spent years working in film as a screenwriter, director, and editor, alongside a career involving digital marketing, multimedia, and public speaking. And Rise of the DragonWitch is no longer the only adventure waiting for readers in Tyrna. The story continues with Book 2, Revenge of the DragonWitch, with even more still to come. So we're going to talk about Tim's journey as a writer, the creation of Tyrna, mythology, dragons, reluctant heroes, world building, writing cinematic fantasy, the transition into Revenge of the DragonWitch without giving anything away, what readers might be able to expect as this world continues to expand in this third book. Now, Tim, welcome to the Read It Rant podcast, and I got to ask, before we get anywhere near dragons, prophecies, mad kings, or alternate worlds, I'd like you to introduce yourself to everybody watching or listening. You know, who is Tim Clark when you're not writing fantasy novels?
Well, for me, the day job is internet marketing. I've been doing it for like 20 years. And it all started way back when I was working in Hollywood. We're doing an independent movie, and I wanted to rent some equipment. I said, if you give me a good deal on this equipment, I'll do your Google AdWords for you. So I took out a Google for Dummies AdWords book and looked up how to do it real fast. Mm-hmm. And then I went and set up his Google AdWords for him, and he gave me a deal on some gear. And then I said, you know what, I really could do this for a day job. So yeah, internet marketing is my thing. And the other thing that I do is I love working on cars too. I'm old school Mr. Fix-It kind of guy, so I also do a YouTube channel where I work on my cars and go to in fact, I went to a car show today, filmed all the cool muscle cars and everything there, and that video will come out tomorrow. So yeah, I'm always doing something. I'm juggling a million things, plus the whole family thing too.
Yeah, same here. And I saw that, you know, you were born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and eventually you spent 13 years in L.A. Working in film. What originally took you from Ohio to Los Angeles?
Honestly, I've always been a writer. I was the kid in class who they would say, you know, give us a 5-page report, and I would say, does it only have to be 5 pages? So, because for me, it was like, I just love to write. And at one point, I actually had a friend who had moved out, college roommate who had moved out to LA. And his brother-in-law was the Terminator in Terminator 2, mm-hmm. Robert Patrick. Mm-hmm. He was doing some independent movies, and they were like, hey, what could we do here for this? What ideas do you have for this? They were scrambling to do this little independent feature. And I just crossed my mind, I'm like, I should give it a try. I've always loved movies. I'd loved the idea of writing for movies. So I just looked at my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I said, do you want to go to California? And she said, okay.
Okay.
So we literally just packed up, mm-hmm. drove to California in 1995, and I started, you know, working in the field. I actually got a couple of mentors who were A-list writers, and they were willing to help me out and guide me along and, you know, give me tips and all of that. And then eventually I started working with them on their projects. So that's just something for me. I've probably written 25, 30 original scripts. I've done rewrites on movies, you know, studio productions. Mm-hmm. I've made my own, even like short films. We had a short film collective where we did, you know, little comedy shorts that we would upload to YouTube when YouTube had like no channels whatsoever. You know, mm-hmm. nothing was going on back then. But we were just doing little funny skits. And so yeah, I've always just loved writing.
What you worked on anything major in Hollywood as a screenwriter? Any big movies?
Yeah, a lot of the production stuff I did. A lot of research and rewrites on the Zorro movies, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, National Treasure movies, Shrek. God, what am I forgetting?
Are you in the credits?
What's that?
Are you like on the movies? I know there's like a bunch of credits. Are you in any of the credits at the end of the movie?
Here's the thing. In order to get a credit in Hollywood, you have to change 50% of the movie.
Oh shoot.
So my thing back then was, and it was stupid because I could have gotten paid more, but my thing back then was I'm going to make it better. I'm not going to make it mine. I'm just going to make it as good as it possibly can be. And I have credits, but it's nothing in the major ones because those were again the big deal A-list guys, and they would say, bring me the funny guy, get the funny guy to come in here and polish this up. And so I would go in and throw in some jokes and do little things like that. Like for one example would be I actually read the original Shrek script. There was a wicked witch that sort of showed up at the beginning and then disappeared, and I took the wicked witch out. And the studio was like, no, this is a parody of all fairy tales. We have to have a wicked witch. And I said, but it was such a bit part that it just didn't matter to the story, didn't improve the story at all. And they said, well, what are you going to do to replace it? And I said, guess what Shrek 2 can be about?
The Wicked Witch.
The Wicked Witch.
The evil fairy godmother.
Yeah. So, just little things like that. But for me, it was just, how can I make it better?
And how much did working in film influence the way you eventually approach writing, your novels?
Writing screenplays and writing books are two completely different things. As much as it seems like it's exactly the same, it's not. In fact, just having to write much more in the descriptions, for example. I mean, honestly, screenplays are dialogue. It's just a lot of dialogue. Exterior desert day, sun beats down on an old classic car, and the two people get out of the car with their guns drawn, and that's all you have to write. And the director says, "Here's how we're going to do this," and so that you don't have to do necessarily as much. So for me, writing dialogue is it's just I don't even have to think about it. Once I know who the characters are, the characters literally start talking, and I start typing. With the descriptions, it's a little harder because you have to paint the world without going so long and giving so much detail. One of the things you have to do in a screenplay is you don't describe the person's bedroom, for example. We used to read a lot of people's sort of spec scripts, and there would be just this huge section where they would describe this child's bedroom before they woke up. And it's like the only thing you really needed to talk about was maybe this piece and the alarm on their nightstand. And so that's kind of where I'm like, I don't want to do super long descriptions. I just maybe want to touch on the two things that are going to matter most, that are really going to describe it to you, give you that picture, and you may fill in the blanks as you're reading. But I don't want to just give piece after piece after piece of that world and constantly, introduce each chapter, showing what this is going to be about.
Yeah, no, that's a problem I think with a lot of trad books. They have the very expository style of writing, and you do too much world building and too much description, and you lose the plot and you lose the reader because they get way too confused. But your professional background also includes digital marketing, multimedia production, and public speaking. How strange has it been having to use those skills to market your own creative work? Because I know we talked about that before, and with YouTube especially.
Yeah. One thing that comes in handy is knowing a lot of the little tricks that you have to do, especially with social media. You don't just want to upload a picture. You want to upload a picture, instead of just calling it image.563, you can actually call that dark fantasy book recommendations.jpg. And when if you do a little video to TikTok, for example, I'll call it something like epic fantasy book review. And then .mov, and I'll upload that in there. And what's funny is I know it works because the song suggestions it gives me are all related to maybe epic fantasy.
Yep.
So, it's seeing what that file title is called. So little things like that really help. But if somebody said, hey, does having a background in marketing help you sell your books? And I'm like, absolutely not. Because selling a product, selling a service, selling some software, something like that I might do in the day job is one thing because it's presenting something that people need. With a book, you're giving them something that they want. They just don't know they want it yet. And you're competing against 2 million titles a year that are getting uploaded. And you've got to have a great cover. You've got to have a great title. You've got to have a great blurb, a little synopsis. You've got to have elevator pitches, which is that 1 or 2 or 3 lines. And so, that's one of the things that's kind of helped me. I actually have a Google Doc that has 50, just little blurbs. This happens and this happens and this is this about this character, and something real quick that hopefully catches somebody when they're reading on Threads or on Instagram or TikTok. You want to be able to catch them with just a couple of sentences, a couple of lines if you can. So I just have copy and paste, and I make up a bunch of images with Photoshop, and with dragons and fantasy backgrounds and all of that kind of thing. So, and then throwing the cover in there. So it's been helpful for me to know some of the technical stuff, but it's still marketing, and it's still very hard marketing to get the name out there, to get people to pull them in, to get them to buy the book. Even if it's an ebook, even if it's a hardcover. This book is 600 and some pages, and I can't price it too high because somebody's maybe they're not going to take a chance on it. So, but I also know I want to make $1 or $2 on it whenever I sell a book. But trad books you might have out there, the same book might be $30, and I'm competing against that. So I have to bring that cost down and make sure that I am presenting something that has a good cover, like I said, a good title, good informational blurb that gets them and pulls them in and says, hey, I want to check this out. And so at least I do have that background. Really does kind of help.
And I know TikTok and Facebook especially don't make marketing easy. And I feel like now, like TikTok's algorithm has now geared a lot toward advertisement. And I feel like shortly they're going to start to make people start to pay for promotion, because every single video I see pop up on the FYP now wants me to put $16. You'll get so many views, and I feel like it's slowly going in that direction.
Yeah, it's funny because if you think about it, that's their goal is literally to sell ads to everybody, and they don't pay very well, at least as far as some of the creators that are out there. So that for them, it's just about maximizing profit. And yeah, every video I upload, I get the little thing that says, for $21, you can, 30,000 people will see this. And I'm like, yeah, but are they good 30,000 people?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tempting. And then you also have to think, well, gosh, can I use that song that I picked out that TikTok gave me? No, you can't use that in the promotions. No, you can't. You have to cookie cut it down and, it can't be that long, or no, it can't contain this. You can't show that. Can't talk about, so it cuts into your creativity too.
It does, and I can't even live stream from here on the TikTok because of TikTok's security protocols with their streaming software. They only want you to use their platform, and their platform is heavily regulated, and just the security protocols are ridiculous. But at what point did you really realize that Rise of the DragonWitch was really the story you needed to write?
Honestly, I think my daughter wanted to rewatch the Lord of the Rings movies again, I think for the second time all the way through.
Just a second?
We're watching the show, and we're watching the movies, and I think I had also just recently finished a rewatch of Game of Thrones, and I thought, I would love to be able to write a fantasy. But and I've read George R.R. Martin, I've read Tolkien, I've read a lot of the bigger fantasy books throughout the years, and I just thought, and it may not be the case, but I just thought to myself, I'm not smart enough to do that. I don't have the prose. I'm not a great enough writer that I could just write a fantasy book. And so the thing that got me going was, how can I do this? How can I do a fantasy book without it being a fantasy book? And I said, well, what if I take a story told by a person from our modern era, from someone here on Earth, a 20-something college student, for example, and I said, what if I take her and drop her into a fantasy world? What if I threw her into the Game of Thrones? How long would she live? And probably not long. But I just said, how can I do it so that it's my writing ability, my ability to tell a story, but without having the great prose that a lot of these fantasy authors have. And I said, if I tell it from her point of view, and they show her a hydra, she has no idea what that is, because what 20-year-old college student knows what a hydra is? What college student knows what a griffin is, or a, whatever? So if she gets it wrong, then it's her fault. It's not mine. So for me, it's from her point of view, and she's telling the story of, and doesn't believe any of this is really going on at first, of course, because she's being punked somehow, because this can't possibly really be happening. And that was fun for me to tell, because I also like to be able to have a character who is, she's anxious, she's scared, she's definitely an introvert, but she is also very sarcastic. She even says at the beginning of the book she is a class clown. And so I said, I can give her some of my humor. And of course now, like as I'm writing the third book, she's just spouting off, and I have no control over her whatsoever. Her sarcasm is off the charts. But it's so much fun to write, because she's covering up, she's defending herself with her humor. She's hiding behind that. Some people will tell jokes because then they don't have to talk, or then they don't have to perform. They don't have to be on stage. They can just be that person that sits at the back of the class and throws out a little one-liner here and there, and people would leave her alone. And so that's kind of that's the character that I wanted for this story, because it's a little bit of me, but it's also me on steroids. And so it was so much fun to have her journey in Rise of the DragonWitch that this was going to be a standalone book. Honestly, the reason why it is so big is because I was going to do one story, just tell that story and be done with it. Because if nobody liked it, nobody bought it, nobody whatever, then I'm like, okay, that's done. I can go on and try something different. But then again, when I got done with it, I dropped enough clues in this one that I said, maybe I can do a second book. And so I just wrote a second book, and now I'm writing the third and final book in the trilogy, because she just kept saying, I want to tell more stories. I want to tell more jokes. I want to keep going. And so I just said, okay, we'll do some more books.
Was there a particular mythology, legend, creature, piece of folklore that really first planted the seed for this world?
Well, I know a lot of the times when you have fantasy, there's like, oh, everything is British, Arthur sort of folklore, or everything is just Western Europe. And I said, how can I break that mold a little bit? So one of the things that's fascinating, and I don't know if anybody that would read this book would even realize it, but almost every city, every kingdom name, every creature that's in this is from the folklore that exists on Earth. So there are myths from the Arthurian legends. There are myths from Norse. There are myths from Africa, from Persia, from Greece, from Rome. I took a little bit of almost everything from here and there. A lot of the names, like somebody, if you said, oh, there's a kingdom here called Valhalla, then there's likely going to be like Viking type people there. There's a place called Atlantis down south. Then hey, maybe that's where that myth came from. Whatever it is, almost everything, even some of the character names are from myth. Finley McGuire's name, you kind of discover this. I don't really think it's too much of a spoiler, but you sort of figure out that she might be a descendant from Finhal MacCool, which I know I got that wrong, but it's an Irish myth, and they used to call him Finn McCool to shorten it up. So Finley McGuire was even a name from Irish myth, from that kind of background. But Russian myth, there's a little bit of Eastern mythology, and so just a little bit of everything. And so yeah, everything that's in there's a Karkadan instead of a horse. And the Persian myth of the Karkadan was a horse-like creature that was like almost half horse, half rhino. And I even found little pictures of them and put them in there for inspiration. So it was just fun to be able to mix things up, because what if, and this world is called Tir-Na, and our world is called Terra. So Terra is on one side of the sun, Tir-Na is on the other side of the sun. What if people that were on that world were transported to our world, and they told all the stories of all the things that they saw there, and they thought they were real, but what they were really seeing was not something here on Earth, but something from this other world. And so that's kind of one thing I wanted to, because I'm like, if she can be taken from here, from Earth to this world, maybe other people in the past were taken the other way. And that's where we got all of those myths. That's where we heard of dragons and unicorns and hydras and hellhounds. And so that's kind of one thing I'd love to have, because it's all based on our myths, all the things that we've heard of. But if I don't get it exactly right, well, maybe the story was told 1,000 years ago and it changed a little bit here and there, and it may not be exactly that way here on this planet.
So I know that the Tyrna exists on the other side of the sun. That is really fascinating. How did you get that idea that that world exists on the other side of the sun? Like, where did that particular idea come from?
Part of, and you kind of even find out more about it in the third book, but I kind of wanted to make it a mysterious thing where this world was set up and surrounded possibly by ancient aliens, possibly by something that said, hey, we're gonna set this world up on the other side of our sun, and we're gonna hide it. And we're gonna make sure that no matter what kind of technology Earth comes up with, they'll never see this world. And so a lot of the things, there are actually some things that are on Tyrna that are way beyond the technology of anything that we have here, and certainly way beyond their technology, which is certainly more at the medieval level over there. And there's a myth in the Norse mythology called the world serpent, where it's a piece that goes around the world, and it's two snakes biting each other's heads. And that was something that they had said was part of their creation. So what if I put something around this world that when you looked up, you could actually see the ring around the planet, but that ring is actually something that's keeping everything hidden away from us. And, just, so there's a little bit almost of a science fiction element to the stories as well.
So why did you want your protagonist to be a college student from our world rather than someone who was born and raised on the other side of the sun on Tyrna?
Again, because I think I would have had to have written that story as somebody who is a very talented and probably much more talented than I am fantasy writer. And that's kind of what I thought at the beginning. Now, if I look back on it, I'm like, I probably could have done it. But when I started it, I was just a little scared of my ability. Mm-hmm. And then when I go back and I would read the book, and I've read the book probably 20 times, I'm like, yeah, I probably could have done it. But again, it was just trying to do something a little bit different. And so if I take somebody from this world and take them to this other world, then at least you're seeing it through her eyes. One of the great things about this book is if you're not into fantasy or you've never read fantasy and you don't know where to start, mm-hmm. because she's taken from the world and has to describe everything, it's almost like you're being introduced to a world-building element by someone who's never seen this before. So it's almost like an intro to fantasy.
Mm-hmm. That's a very cinematic. It's a first-person POV, but it's also a very cinematic way to tell a story. Who can get accredited for Finley's her voice and her character with her snarky and how her personality and character is?
Whenever I start any new story, the very beginning of it is just terrible. And I usually have to go back and rewrite it several times because I have to sort of figure out the characters first. I have to hear them. Some authors will say this, others say they can't do it. But when I'm writing, I'm watching a movie in my head. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm seeing it's playing out, the scenes are happening, and I'm just typing as fast as I can, trying to keep up. And I then go back and try to fix it because as I'm typing fast, it's not good. But I don't really know the character until we start to get into the story and they start to be confronted by things. And then they start doing things that I didn't even outline for, where it's like, no, we were supposed to go here, not do this. And that the character then takes over. So then I have to go back a little bit and edit and fix and tweak the beginning again, because that now that I know who she is, I have to think, well, she probably wouldn't do that, or I'd have to change this, or she'd say something different here. But yeah, it's a little bit of me. It's a little bit of my daughters. I have one who is just finishing college, one who's just finishing high school. And I gave them a lot of stuff. I said, here, does this make sense to you? Does this read right? would you say this? And they would look at it and go, no, I would never say that. So, but so I would fix it. I was like, what would you say? But they would help too. But then it was also after a while, she just became a completely separate personality, and she's living rent free in my head right now. and again, she's talking and I'm typing.
So there's also the question of leadership when it comes to Finley. What interested you about exploring the difference between being told you're important and actually becoming someone others are willing to follow?
What's funny about this is that she is told that she's the chosen one. And my title before I came up with Rise of the DragonWitch was I'm not the effing chosen one. And I was actually going to have that be the title because I'm not crazy about the whole chosen one concept. The he's the one from Luke Skywalker, and he's told he's the one that's going to save everyone. Or Matrix, it's going to be Neo, he's the one that's going to save everyone. And I said, what if someone was told they were the chosen one but doesn't want that? And we've had reluctant heroes before, but in her case, I wanted this to almost be the most realistic fantasy book that I could write. There is a magic element to this, but the magic is actually based a little bit on energy, on theories that we have here, strings of energy that somehow can get plucked out here and there, that kind of thing, because energy can either be created or destroyed. And so if you had something, somebody says, oh, my uncle died, and then I saw him appear in my bedroom that night. What if that's leftover energy and someone was able to harness something like that? So anyway, I just tried to make as much of this as realistic as possible. And if somebody came to you and said, hey, Tony, you're the chosen one, you would probably start laughing. You'd be like, no, you got to find somebody else, man, because I can't do this. And if even if she's 20 years old, she knows at that point, no, this is not who I am. This is not who I'm supposed to be. You've got, she says it many times, you got the wrong person. And sometimes it's a matter of just saying, they have expectations of you and some vague prophecy that doesn't really know, even the other characters say, she's not the one. You should have picked somebody who can fight. You should have picked somebody who already knows how to do some of this stuff. And so that was kind of, her struggle, is that she had to catch up to expectations, and she doesn't ever really meet them until things really start rolling along, and she starts seeing what other people are sacrificing, that she says, hey, even if I'm not, or even if I am, or if I'm not, it doesn't matter. I still got to help. And sometimes when you watch other people sacrifice, you realize you have to sacrifice too. And that's where the switch can get flipped a little bit, where you're like, okay, I may have been really lucky so far, but now I got to push that luck. Now I've really got to figure out how to help these people, because they've been doing nothing but carrying me for the past 10 chapters.
Why did immortality, when it comes to the antagonist, why did it make so much sense as the ultimate ambition for that antagonist?
Because there are things that are in the magic element of this. The protagonist, of course, says, this world has been beaten down by dragons. There are actually still living dinosaurs on this world. There are things that every you go into this forest and there are giant spiders that could eat you, things like that. This world has been beaten down, and they've started to get, you can almost tell they've started to get the upper hand. There aren't as many dragons destroying the cities, and they're building up cities again. Things are starting to grow. They're starting to technologically advance. And someone said, guess what? This is the prime opportunity. This is something I can actually take over and I can control. And maybe says, hey, the only way this is going to happen if I can do this for a very long, long, long time. Because I've seen people come and go on this world, and they go far too easily. And if I'm in control, I can change it and shape it the way I want it to be. And said, the best way to do this is if I am immortal. And if it exists, who wouldn't want to go for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. What makes a compelling fantasy villain for you? Is it pure evil enough, or does the villain need to believe there's some justification behind what they're doing?
In this case, I actually didn't make the villain incredibly super intricate, only because it was told from the point of view of the main character who was not from this world. Which means she didn't necessarily get to spend a lot of time seeing what all he was doing in the background. And that's why, and there's actually some twists that she totally doesn't expect. That, about the halfway point where it's like everything just completely falls apart for her, because everything that she'd been told up to that point was a lie. And so it's really kind of the thing where I knew, as without adding a second point of view, where someone else could say, "Oh, here's what our bad guy was up to." I couldn't necessarily make him super super complicated, but I do at least have a twist in there that the bad guy isn't necessarily the one you think it is.
And I know with a lot of dual POVs with this kind of like book, they would have like a protagonist standpoint, but then the next POV, like a couple chapters over, would be the villain part of it. And you can see what he's kind of formulating, but some writers would even like keep that POV shrouded in mystery, so it keeps you guessing, and it's to see if the protagonist is going to run into whatever they're trying to plan, and it creates this cat and mouse dynamic, and that gets kind of hard to write sometimes. So I can understand that, but without revealing like any specific character turns, you also play with unlikely alliances and the idea of enemies potentially becoming something more complicated. Do you enjoy writing characters whose loyalties like aren't immediately obvious?
There was one movie, L.A. Confidential, Russell Crowe and somebody else. What was his name? The Australian actor. Anyway, L.A. Confidential starts out, you think Russell Crowe's cop is the bad guy. And you think the other detective is the good guy. And halfway through the movie, it switches. And and it's kind of a surprise. I hope I didn't spoil that movie. It's about 20-some years old, so hopefully I didn't spoil it. But
I've seen it already.
I loved that concept of that. A lot of the times your good guys can be that morally gray character who does things that you don't necessarily like, but you see why they had to do it. And so, Finley actually teams up with several different species across this world, and these people were all outcasts from their kingdoms. There are literally walking and talking, almost Planet of the Apes type apes. There are, imagine if Neanderthals had lived and didn't die out. And so there are these giant Neanderthal type characters. There are characters who actually can fly, and they actually have wings. So you can kind of see where that myth might have gotten brought back to Earth. Of, hey, I saw an angel, or I saw Cupid. These people actually had wings. So there are different species on this planet, and our bad guy is literally trying to wipe out everyone who is not human on this world. And so they all said, let's come together, but let's not send them our best. Let's just send some of these people we don't like very much, because we don't think this is going to work. This guy's taken over, and there's not much we can do about it. And so for me, it was just fun to have characters that some were straight as an arrow, who I don't want to hurt anybody. I cannot kill. And somebody else who says, I'll kill you just for staring at me wrong. And she's constantly being torn between, is this right? Can I do this? And I know things need to be done, but she has to sort of get pulled in different directions. So it was kind of fun playing with that and having so many different types of characters come together to make that misfit group, that it was just really interesting for me.
And I know epic fantasy can be kind of hard to write sometimes, especially with a first person POV, but also a really big cast of characters as well as expanded mythos. How did you stay organized while writing this amazing story?
The things that I had, one of the things that I always like to do when I talk about a character and introduce a new character is, say, hey, this is Bob. Bob is a walking and talking monkey. And I'll have Finley say, oh, the monkey man is talking again. Or, hey, the ape man, what's his name again? Bob, yeah. It's not really his name, but just as an example. But it's one of those things where I like try to make sure I sort of softly introduce over and over again, so that the reader doesn't say, okay, here's 9 names all at once, and I don't remember what these 9 people, I don't remember what they look like, what they do, whatever, anything like that. So, because I remember when I first read Song of Fire and Ice
Oh yeah.
from George R. R. Martin, and it was like
Hmm.
the chapter would start out with a name, but then all the way through it there are 14, 15 names at a minimum, and after a while I'm like, all right, I have no idea who that is. So I said I'm going to learn from that. How can I do this so that I don't introduce too many all at once, and I don't overwhelm, but then I also try to remind. Yes, this is the one who does this, and even she's like, "Is there going to be a quiz later?" When he's introducing a couple of the names, she literally looks at him and is like, "Professor, should I be taking notes? Is there going to be a quiz later?" And because again, it's one of those things where like, okay, even she doesn't get it, so that's okay. Let's just keep going.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to reading some of the books, even from trad or indie, sometimes it's like the big glossary guides of characters, and especially when it comes to creatures, because a lot of authors make up their own stuff, and it's very hard to visualize something when you have like all these different things on a page and there's no contextualization. That drove me nuts. And talking about Game of Thrones, like I know when I first read A Song of Ice and Fire, I stopped reading that series because George R. R. Martin just stopped writing and he kept making these freaking shows. I'm not gonna get into that because The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring have got to come out. Um, but he introduces like Sir this, Sir that. Like he just throws all this at the reader, and like he doesn't care to give you any context. And it's like it got his writing almost reminds me of Tolkien in a way, not as great as Tolkien, but it's a little dry when you read it at first, and with like minus the action scenes. Like he focuses a lot on the exposition, medieval like kind of castle and storytelling that way, but when things do pick up, they pick up, but they also slow down a lot. And
Yeah,
it's kind of what really makes it harder for me to read his work because of how dismal and dreary sometimes a lot of his writing is.
yeah.
Um, but how do when you've given readers enough information about a fantasy world, without really overwhelming them?
For me, it is when I go back and reread, I'm like, oh, did I remember to talk about what they were wearing maybe in this particular
Hmm.
chapter, or did I remember to? And I try to look for those things, and then as I'm rereading and rereading and editing, I'm trying to make sure, does this still make sense? Did I include enough description here? Did I? So for me, the writing all the way through in the first draft is terrible. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
and it should be terrible. It should be
Uh-huh.
just one of those, like just getting down the characters in the story and then going back and then saying, okay, how can I improve this? How can I make that better? And then trying to remember, did I remember to include? And I keep my phone notes all open all the time because something I'll be like, oh, I've got to remember to change this. And I've got 1,000 notes in there that I have to go back through as I'm editing and saying, did I include this? Did I remember that? All that kind of stuff. So it's something I have to keep up with because again, you want to, even the other thing that I always recommend everybody do when you finish a couple of drafts, put it away for a while, set it aside,
Hmm.
read it with as fresh of eyes as you can, because you'll again start to read it as a reader would, and you'll say, "Oh, I probably should have had this there." You know what I mean? Just give yourself that chance to get it out of your mind, pick it back up, and then look through it with fresh eyes and try to find what might trip somebody up.
Yeah, I know. I'm writing a book right now, and I actually took a break for a little bit, just because I do it chapter by chapter. I've talked to other authors about how to write, and they were like, you need to visualize the scene. If you can't visualize the scene, you really shouldn't be writing. And I know when I talked to RW about his book, The Pendragon Prodigy, when he wrote it, he's like, I have to keep pictures of my characters on my computer because I can't visualize it without them right there. It helps me like see the story so much better as I type. And I have the same like writing style. Like I have to visually see the scene in my head as I type, and I have the same problem. Like I was giving chapters out to different authors and saying, give me feedback, and then they were how what like what you had when you were like, oh, I have to go back and change it because how it was in my head shouldn't have been how it on the page. Like it just it got really, I guess the message I was trying to convey to the reader got lost in translation from here to here.
Yeah,
um,
it happens. It
it
happens.
does. It does. And but what was the hardest scene or type of scene in Rise of the Dragon Witch to get right? Not because of spoilers, but from like a technical writing standpoint.
Well, again, I think it would come back to about the middle of the book. There is a heavy section, and it involved a lot of emotion for me because it ended up, like you said, you do a chapter at a time. This chapter, I sometimes will do a chapter in a day. And this chapter took me 5, 6 days to write. And again, because it was so emotional that I typed it out and then said, okay, now I've got to go back and type it out again because I was trying to run through it too fast so that it didn't bog me down. But it kept bogging me down every time again because we lose some characters. I mean, it's a bit of a spoiler, but we do lose some characters we care about. And it was each time, if I read that today, it still gets me. And it's really, really, really hard. Mm-hmm. So that was something for me that I knew was going to be hard to do. And I even wanted to put it off and say, maybe I'll go back to that. But it gets me every time, and I know what's happening. I know what's going to come, and it still gets me.
You know, when did you ever have like an issue like when you, because sometimes I have to rewrite chapters and I get frustrated because I'm like, man, I don't know how to say this without like being boring. But like, did you ever have that problem where you're writing a chapter and you keep having to rewrite because it's just you don't know how to put those words onto the page to make the scene you want in your head come alive?
Yeah. The thing, one of the biggest tips that I will give to anybody who is writing is something that another screenwriter told me a long time ago, and it's the door number 3 theory. And the first thing I would say in that case is, can I make it shorter? If it's boring, if it's something that has to be done, but it moves the story ahead, maybe they're walking, like some kind of like Lord of the Rings reference where they're just, okay, they've been walking to Mordor for like 3 chapters now. Can I shorten this down a little bit? Can I take some of it out and say, and the next day the walking continued, but, and then maybe, just sort of just be able to crunch it a little bit. But the other thing is the door number 3 theory, and that is, this is a really bad example, but normally you see in it, like picture a story or a movie, TV show, anything like that. You've got the woman in the hotel room and the man who comes in and he's got a gun. Most writers will say, okay, door number 1 is she takes the gun away from him and shoots him. Door number 2 is she does something wrong and he shoots her. And that's pretty much the standard. I mean, it's like, okay, one of these 2 things is going to happen. One of these guys is going to die, right?
Yeah.
What's door number 3? What could you do to change this scene completely, adding in a different element, maybe something that you had to set up previously? What if somebody comes swooping into the window and breaks through the glass, shoots both of them? Or, but that's a very bad example. But I mean, that's something that could happen that turns it on its head. Mm-hmm. Gives it a little bit of a different take that you didn't expect, but you set up properly. You foreshadowed it. But something that then just is surprising. Because then that can take that boring scene or even a scene that might seem really predictable. Mm-hmm. How can you turn it on its side?
Did you ever have that with Rise of the Dragon Witch or Revenge of the Dragon Witch?
Yeah. There were a couple of times where I said, this has to happen, and I need to get from A to B, but what can I do to change it? And again, sometimes, like I said, these characters, and I don't know if it happens for anybody else, but a lot of the times they do take over. And it's where I'm like, I'll be typing away, and then Finley will say and or do something where as I'm typing, and I'm like, oh yeah, yes, that works. But then I'm like, oh, but I got to go back and fix some things. Like I said, because you have to set that up. You have to foreshadow it. And I'm actually fixing a part in the 3rd book where I had set something up and I'm already good to go. And I got to the big start of the final battle kind of thing. And I said, that's a plot hole. I didn't expect to go here. And now I spent all day yesterday going back and taking away every reference to that point. And but it's something you have to do. And I'm like, because otherwise it will be a major plot hole. So, it's just something, but you switch it and you change it and you think, that works. Ooh, but I wasn't ready for that. So, but I mean, just that door number 3 is the great option because then you're like, a lot of the times those are the plot twists. Those are the things that you're like, again, yeah, this is what normally happens. What can I make different? What can I change it up?
Somebody come busting through the door that like you never thought would come to rescue this lady from this gunman or something crazy. And I think that's I never heard that before. That's a good piece of advice.
And again, it's one of those things because a lot of the times you do see those scenes, and then in the other piece of advice I always give is in every single scene, even if it's two lovers, if it's two enemies, if it's whatever it is, if people are talking, one person has the upper hand. One person has control. They have knowledge that the other person maybe doesn't know, or they've already stolen something that this person doesn't know about. Or sometimes you'll see somebody and they'll say, "Don't you talk to me that way," and he starts talking to her that way because he knows something that she doesn't know. So you always have to keep in mind is who has the upper hand in every conversation, in every scene, in every chapter. And then is there a way you can give the other person the upper hand next? Or is there a way that you can then switch around even more and say, "Oh yeah, but guess what? You didn't know about that." And you'd already set that up, maybe a little bit, a throwaway line here and there that you have to then go back and add. But I mean, again, it's something that they just try to how to figure out who has control and how do you take that control away from them if you need to.
Do you know how Finley's larger story like ultimately ends with the third book since you're in the middle of writing it?
I do, and I'm getting to that point, and it's kind of fun. I'm actually to the point now where I'm starting to want to race ahead. But where I'm like, no, take your time. Because again, I had to spend all day fixing something yesterday, and I did not want to do that. I wanted to keep trucking along. I wanted to get to that because I'm really excited for it. But again, you got to do what you got to do.
Are we going to have like a George R. R. Martin kind of style of writing where you have all these spin-offs and stuff? Is there anything besides Tierna or anything that doesn't necessarily revolve around Finley come to light, or anything other works in progress they may be working on?
Somebody else actually interviewed me and asked me that, and I thought I would love to do a story in this world that has nothing to do with her, but I still love the concept of all of the mythology that's here and being able to take advantage of that. I even had, because I had done a lot of work on the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, I still have a lot of ideas and stories I found and things that I want to use and phrases that I never got to use. You know, like old 17th century curse words kind of stuff. But anyway, and so I was like, what if I did a pirate adventure on Tierna? What if I did a romantasy? One of the things that I did when I was back in Hollywood, I actually used to write romantic comedies. And the best part is I would go into the studio, and I'm 6'4", 250 pounds. And they would look at me and they would go, "Oh, you write the sports movies, don't you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not here to pitch a football movie to you. I'm actually here to pitch a romantic comedy." And they're like,
That is so stereotypical.
But see, that's Hollywood. That is Hollywood. They assume because I was big, I wrote baseball movies or something. And I was like, "No, I write the pretty little romantic comedies. They have a cute meat, and it's wonderful." And their jaw drops open. They were like, "Really?"
Really?
Yeah. In fact, I pitched a movie called Rom-Com, where somebody took all of the romantic comedy movies and just said, "I'm going to make my brother live a romantic comedy. I'm going to give him the cute meat. I'm going to give him this. I'm going to give him all of that." And and I pitched that and then a different one. But it was just kind of funny because they were all like, "Wow, you really do write romantic comedies." So I might do a romantasy. That might be fun to do in this world.
And I know they're proud. Their faces were like gawking, like, "Oh my God, really?" Like, I can't, like, because everybody's probably short in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, I mean, she literally, the studio exec literally looked at me and goes, "You write the sports movies, don't you?" And I go, "No, I do not."
Like, no, I don't.
Like I was going to be the next Bull Durham author or something.
Some Mitch album. But given your filmmaking background, I have to ask, because you used to work in Hollywood, can you ever see, Tierna or The Rise of the DragonWitch becoming a film or television series?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, my Finley is, and I'm going to get her, Anya Taylor Jones, something like that. She played in the, I'm just watching her right now on the show Lucky on Apple TV. But anyway, I was like, dye her hair red and put her on camera. But, I can absolutely see it happening. I know that it won't, because here's the thing with Hollywood. You've got to have what's called mental real estate. It's the reason why there are 7 remakes happening right now of Moana and Spider-Man is out again, and they keep redoing everything because people know about it. They know it exists. They want to see more of it. So unless something has mental real estate, and because if that exec says, yes, let's do Rise of the Dragon Witch, we're going to do a $200 million budget, we're going to have it streaming on Netflix, and it doesn't work, that studio exec gets fired.
Oh, damn.
I mean, they said, you spent what, and it made what? No, you're gone. Bye bye. So they're hedging their bets and saying, no, I only want to go on a book that sold 3 million copies. I only want to go on this TV show and turn it into a movie from 1960s because it was really popular back then. So let's redo that. If they spend $50 million in marketing and $150 million on a movie and it flops, they get fired.
Damn.
And so it's one of those things where I'm like, it would be like look how long it took them to make Mistborn on Apple
yeah, I
TV.
just saw that. Yeah.
They're making the Mistborn, the first book is going to be like a season on Apple TV. And look how popular that book is. Look how many, the Sander Lanch, he's got so many books.
He does.
But look how long it took him to get that recognition, to build up enough mental real estate to say, yep, let's pull the trigger and spend the money.
So, 2 points. First on Sanderson. I tried to read Mistborn. I don't understand the hype on the Mistborn Cosmere original trilogy. It's very poorly written, and I can't get behind peasants that are named Ska. Like, I think that's just dumb. I just couldn't get past it. I didn't know what he was trying to convey, and it was super just bad writing. And
before I started Rise, I actually started reading Mistborn, and I got about we'll say about halfway through, and I thought, okay, how many meetings can you have? It was like meeting after meeting after meeting.
Meeting after meeting.
Occasionally they do the knight running around with the coins, and I like that part. But the next one was another meeting. And again, I finally did finish Mistborn last month. And so that took me 2 years. But I finally did finish it. And I was like, okay, I like the end, but yeah, I'm not seeing it as much. I don't necessarily know if I'll continue, but I do. They got me the second book for Christmas, I think, so maybe I'll read the second book too.
Well, no, I bought his entire Stormlight Archives. I have all 3 books of Mistborn. I have to buy I want to read them. It's going to take me a while because it's just like the Realm of the Elderlings with Robin Hobb. Assassin's Apprentice is so hard to read. I was just talking to Sean about that. Who wrote the Sword and the Shadow and the Scepter? It's just depressing. But I think the reason why that George R. R. Martin won't release his last 2 books is because he wants to milk this nest egg with mental real estate as much as he possibly can. And that's why I don't think he's not releasing his last 2 books.
It could be.
But
or he might be done and he's waiting until he dies. Just says,
I said that
I'll put it out there.
I think what he's gonna wait till he dies and it's gonna be released posthumously, so nobody can rip him in real life for how badly the show ended and how badly the books ended. There's so many theories out there right now. But I mean, I always like ending author interviews by giving the author the floor. For somebody watching or listening who has never encountered your work before, why should Rise of the Dragon Witch be the book they pick up next?
Rise of the Dragon Witch for me, again, is a couple of things. For me, it was my cinematic adventure that I would want to read, that I would want to watch if I could make a series out of it. I said, what would be my Game of Thrones if I could read that or watch that? And so that's what it was for me. And then I also said, what if, because I'm not, this was the first fantasy that I wrote, I'm not a fantasy expert, what would be a good introduction to fantasy for somebody else too? So if you like fantasy that moves, if you like fantasy that doesn't take 3 books to get going, and you like fantasy that doesn't maybe end on a cliffhanger that you kind of have to wait 3 years in between, I give you good solid standalone cinematic stories that I've had several reviews say this is like a movie, or they should make this into a movie. This would be so cool. So that I wanted to make that sort of epic adventure that people would want to read that maybe they're, they like something that's a little more exciting, a lot more happens. And that was sort of my entree into it. But I also didn't want it to be super dark, super grim, unhappy ending kind of thing. I wanted it to be, like I said, almost like you're reading a movie. I wanted it to be exciting. I wanted it to be escapism. And I wanted to actually even, have you learn a little bit about the mythology around our world. So that for me was the fun part. Give it a little bit of heart and give it a little bit of humor too. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with my story. And I've got 2 stories out, and I've got a 3rd and final coming. And this is a character that you will like her, you will root for her, you will fear for her, and you will want to throw things at her. So, because she does make some choices that a 20-year-old might make. And that's, somebody said, why does she have to be 20? I'm like, well, I remember when I was 20, I was an idiot. I was an absolute idiot doing stupid things. And she has leadership thrown on her, and she does some stupid things. And so for me, it was like almost reliving my past a little bit of, hey, do you remember what it was like when you were, you didn't think about the consequences? And so, yeah, I wanted to tell that story, and that's what I'm doing with these 3 books.
Gotcha. Well, I thank you so much for coming on to the Read It Rant podcast and giving us a look behind the curtain at Finley McGuire Tierna, the mythology behind the world, and the journey of creating the Chronicles of Tierna. Everybody watching and listening, if today's conversation has you ready to step into Tierna for yourself, start with Tim Clark's Rise of the DragonWitch, and the adventure doesn't stop there. Once you've entered Tierna, you can continue the story with Book 2, which is Revenge of the DragonWitch, and keep your eyes open because Book 3 is coming soon, which means this world isn't just finished yet. And make sure you give Tim a follow on TikTok so you can keep up with his books, writing updates, and everything happening with the Chronicles of Tierna. And if Rise of the DragonWitch, sounds like your kind of epic fantasy, head over to Amazon, pick up your copy, and don't forget to check out Revenge of the DragonWitch while you're there. Support your authors, buy their books, leave reviews, recommend the stories you love, repost them on TikTok, any reviews or videos, because word of mouth can make an enormous difference for an author. Tim, once again, man, thank you for hanging out with me today. And to everybody watching or listening, make sure you're following the Read It Rant podcast for more author interviews, book reviews, indie author spotlights, and plenty more rants coming your way. Until next time, keep reading, keep supporting authors, and embrace the rant. This is the Read It Rant podcast, and we are out.